Yes, what is good, people? It is Dilly D back with another video today for you guys. This one is a juicy one, ladies and gentlemen. It is a full D's Barbarian build guide, and I can't wait to share some of this information with you. I've been wanting to do a video like this for a while. I've never really put this sort of content out before, but we're going to do it today, boys. This is basically my New World tank build. Honestly, in my opinion, and going off the playstyle that I enjoy the most, this is definitely one of the best tank builds that you can go for. I'm going to be talking through, the pros, the cons. I'll be talking about the skills and attributes. Be talking a little bit about the PvP must-knows, some useful tips, and obviously respecs when you are going into those wars and we're going for a little bit more of that crowd control. During the preview and the beta, I actually played this build. Unfortunately, didn't get to max level, but this is what I will be aiming for on full release. And obviously, as we do get to 60 and we see, perks and, the full attributes coming into play, this build will definitely flourish, and it will definitely be one that is worth trying out if you are into tanking on MMOs. Firstly, the pros. It is very sustainable in fights where you are outnumbered. This is super important for me. Obviously, being a content creator and trying to get those clips, you know what I'm talking about, boys. When I am going for those clips, it is definitely essential for me to be able to outnumber people. I love beating people in a 3v1, 2v1, whatever it may be. That is definitely something that highlights for me, and especially during those wars, where you are literally on the front line and you have to take that amount of damage and you have to be able to regenerate as much health as possible. This is definitely one of those builds for that sort of thing. It is also very, very strong in a 1v1. It has decent movement with the Great Axe. If you can close the gap perfectly, movement isn't that much of an issue because you do have a few stuns and stuff, which we'll talk about shortly. There is a few cons that I'd like to mention. When on cooldowns, movement does lack. We're using one skill, which is pretty much the majority of our movement, which is the charge on the Great Axe. And obviously, it's a great skill. It's one of the best movement skills you can get in the game. However, when this is on cooldown, it is all about closing that gap for effectiveness. You need to be able to close that gap. Otherwise, you're going to lack the movement. Another thing, there's no dodge rolls, unfortunately. We're going to be going for that heavy armor. We're going to be going for those extra benefits, which I won't be going into too much during this video. It is definitely one of those things. We kind of do want to be going for heavy armor. Naturally, as a tank, you want to be able to absorb as much damage as possible. So let's get straight on into it, ladies and gentlemen. This is the skills and attributes that I will be going over for the build. And basically, I'm going to be covering a few more things that are, just useful tips for you guys to know, such as perks. These are definitely something that you need to look out for, ladies and gentlemen. It's probably something that you've not even noticed in the game yet, because we've not been able to get to endgame and see them for their full potential. Weapon 1 is the Great Axe. This is going to be the primary damage dealer. It's going to be giving you a lot of CC and a lot of health regen, being on those up close and personal encounters. The first passive that you're going to go for is Mauler's Resolve. It gives you that extra stamina when you are below 50% health. This is definitely essential because stamina is pretty much the main thing that is going to be controlling these sort of fights. You need to learn to keep an eye on that stamina bar, because as soon as you run out of that stamina, you're not going to be able to dodge, you're not going to be able to block. There's a multiple... There's a lot of things, basically, that you're not going to like as soon as you run out of stamina. So maintaining that stamina is essential for us. So we've got Enduring Strike as the second one. This adds grit to every Great Axe heavy attack. And especially there, you can see it's 20% damage reduction while the heavy attack is active. Now that is beautiful. It's going to be stopping people from stunning you, from staggering you, all these sort of CC effects. This is definitely going to be one of those to ensure that you get that at maximum damage output. So the first skill that you will be unlocking is Gravity Well. You guys have probably seen this before, but it's basically you throw out a vortex and it pulls foes to the center. This is going to go hand in hand with a perk that I'm going to be mentioning a little bit later on in the video. So remember that, and we'll continue on through these passives right now. So next we've got gravity. After you pull a foe, they are held for 30% longer. This is essential. You know, we want to be trying to control the fights. We want to be CCing as many of the enemies as possible, especially in those wars. We've got crowded well and obviously unyielding. We just want to max out the gravity well, to be honest. You know, this increases the burst damage, and we've got unyielding, which gains us fortify, or gains the allies fortify when standing in the well. This is perfect for those war encounters. You know, you want to be chucking that in straight onto those points, and it's giving everyone that bonus damage reduction. So we're going to go straight over onto the Reaper side now, and Greed is going to be the first passive that you're going to be picking up. This is the light attacks with your Great Axe give you 5% damage for 5 seconds. Now this is a really, really important one to remember there, guys, because you want to be remembering the fact that you have this passive as soon as you go into that fight. You want to be attacking with a light attack as soon as you can get that hit off, which then gives you this 5 seconds big damage to try and unload as many of those heavy attacks as you can, and we'll get into that a little bit more now. The next skill you want to be going for is charge. Now this is your main movement ability. It's 10 meters with 120% damage. I tell you what, boys, it is absolutely incredible. It's probably one of my favorite and most effective movement skills that there are out there on any weapon. You definitely want to be maxing this out with frenzied momentum and unpredictable strike for sure, because this just basically gives you more damage up to 165%, and now the charge will be doing 120 to 140% weapon damage based on how far you have traveled. Critical gains is the next one you want to be going for, or you know, you might have gone down this route already. It doesn't really matter which order you go on. So the next one is frustration. After one of your attacks is blocked, 15% damage for 10 seconds. Now listen, boys and girls, remember we mentioned about greed. This is exactly the same for frustration. You want to be remembering to block an attack and then go for the counter in these sort of fights. You know, even not only are you going to be absorbing some of the damage, but then you're going to be able to have that extra 15% for 10 seconds. So if you want to throw those light attacks out, greed is going to be stacking, and you are going to be doing some big damage. The next skill is execute. I've gone for execute purely in those 1v1 situations because, you know, you're going to be doing some serious damage with this skill. It is a powerful overhead attack that deals 300% weapon damage versus foes under 50% health. Now that's the key thing to remember there. You know, you're not really going to be using this skill until you do get them under that 50% health bar, because, you know, that's where it's going to be most effective. This is like the finishing move, as it says in the title. You want to be maxing this out with Unstoppable Greed and Executioner for those critical hits, and obviously the grit during the attack is beautiful stuff, mate. Unstoppable. You know, if you're getting an enemy down to 50% HP, this is what they need to watch out for, because if you're hitting them with an execute, especially with the grit, it's going to be unstoppable. You're going to be finishing them. GG's, baby. We've got feed as well, which is the next passive. It is the Great Axe attacks against foes below 30% heal you for 10% damage done. Now this plays perfectly with execute, and it's the reason I'm explaining it in this video. Basically, you're going to be healing up 10% of the damage done. Now let me explain something for a second. If you manage to block one of those attacks, whilst the opponent, you know, obviously has around 60% health, and then you're throwing out some light attacks, maybe even a heavy attack as well with the grit from Enduring Strike, think about the damage that you're going to be putting out as soon as you hit that execute. You know, you've got the stacks of the extra damage, and you've got a heal coming in from feed if they're below 30% health. So this is definitely things to just pay attention to, and you know, make sure to use these in fruition with each other. For the final ability, we've gone with Bloodlust, ladies and gentlemen, and this is just a 30% extra movement speed and deal 15% more damage when looking at a foe from 15 meters. The reason I didn't go with Mauler's Fury, obviously, is because the passives on the Reaper side seem to fit the build a little bit stronger. It does help us with the movement, which is obviously a con that I mentioned at the start of the video. So make sure to go for Bloodlust. It is going to make you a little bit faster, boys, in that heavy armor. So next we're going to move straight over onto the second weapon, which is the Sword and Shield. Now obviously, as a tank, you are going to be choosing that defender side. You know, we're focusing heavily on damage absorption and, you know, trying to withstand as much damage as possible without going down. You know what? That's what I'm talking about, boys. You're going to need that in the wars, so take my advice. First things first, we're going to go with Shield Rush. Now, this is definitely an important skill. This rushes forward 5 meters, knocking back foes and dealing 125% weapon damage. Now, listen, this acts as a stun. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to buy you that time to even switch to the Great Axe in order to unleash the full damage. You know, if you've got an enemy running away, especially in those 1v1s or the 2v1s where they're trying to open the gap between you and the enemy, you've got to be shield rushing them down as soon as possible, managing to get that stun, and then following up with the shield bash. But we'll talk about that more in a second. So we've got the sturdy shield, which is going to grant you the 15% extra physical armor. Then you want to be going for elemental resistance. This is the, you know, all the magic types, 10% reduced, and 1 with the shield. When you block with a shield, all shield skills recharge 1%. This, again, very, very good passive. This is a top tier passive at the moment for me, and I'll tell you a little bit more why. Let's carry on going over the skills first so that you guys can see the structure. So, Shield Bash, this is our main stun, and honestly, one of the best stuns on the game right now from Sword and Shield. You know, it's going to be giving you that extra 2 seconds of stun, and it's multiple stuns. Intimidating Bash, we've got Shield Bash, which causes greatly increased threat. This is basically for PvE, but you want to be maxing out the Shield Bash purely for concussive Bash. Now, this just increases the stun by an extra 1 second. That's going to buy you so much time. That is literally enough time to switch to the Great Axe and get off a heavy attack whilst they're still stunned. And it's going to, you know, it is definitely something that you need to pay attention to with this build, because this is your main stun. So the final skill on the Sword and Shield is the Defiant Stance. This is going to reduce your incoming damage for 8 seconds by 30%. One thing to note with Defiant Stance, as soon as you pop it and you switch to the Great Axe, the Defiant Stance is going to cut off. The cooldown's going to start. It's 45 seconds, so just bear that in mind. You want to be using Defiant Stance if you've got primarily more than one enemy on you, and you need to buy yourself a little bit of time to work out how you're going to outplay them. So we've got Final Countdown and Restoration, which is the, you know, the passives for Defiant Stance, gaining 15% of your max health when Defiant Stance ends. Now listen, that means it is going to heal you for 15% of your max health, which I think is beautiful. It is music to my ears. It is basically the one skill that is going to counteract the enemies and make them go, oh snap, this guy's just healed up 15% of his HP and now he's got a Great Axe in his hand. So the final one is Defensive Formation. Whilst blocking, reduce damage to all allies within 2 meters by 30%. The reason we've gone for this is obviously because the passives on this side, you know, we've not really gone for anything on the Swordmaster. You do want to be trying to max out Defender as much as possible, but I just really do prefer the passives on this side because it is all about that damage reduction and it is all about sustaining in the fight for as long as possible. And obviously in the wars, this is a beautiful, beautiful passive to have because it is going to help you stand shoulder to shoulder with the other tanks in the team. It's going to be giving the allies that you've got next to you the 30% reduced damage. So bear that in mind. Super, super good passive to have. So these are my PvP must-knows. If you are going to be flagging that PvP on, you've got to make sure that you know these guys. Honestly, for full release, definitely drill these into your head. Make sure that you're remembering it because these are going to basically help you so much in winning those fights. A majority of players aren't even going to know what's going on. But here we go. Number 1, the dodge and switch mechanic. This is drilled into my head after trying a heal build in the closed beta, and I won't get into it too much because obviously we're talking about the Barbarian now. However, the dodge and switch mechanic literally won me fights. So when you dodge, you have basically like a half a second where your character will stop, and he will stop and then continue to run. Now, if you dodge and you switch your weapon at the same time, you are going to actually cancel that out, cancel that slight stop, and you're going to be able to continue to run. Closing the gap is like one of the main things that I can say, you know, it's the opposite of having such good movement. If you can manage to close the gap and you can get off one of your stuns early with that Sword and Shield, that is when you're just going to be popping off. Number 2 is the stamina drain. Now, this is very important, and I tell you what, it's quite easy to learn, but it's so difficult to master. And at the start of the game, it's going to be naturally a little bit tougher to utilize and understand, because you're not really going to have as much stamina as you would at endgame. So stamina is definitely the most important thing when it comes to PvP, like for any build, I would say. Maybe not if you're a healer, but even still, if you're PvPing, it is definitely one of the most important things. You want to be keeping an eye on that stamina bar, and you want to make sure you never hit 0. The reason I'm saying this is because the stamina regen time is a lot quicker if you don't hit 0. As soon as you hit 0, that stamina is going to be taking a slight pause, and it's not going to be regenning as quick. So you need to be careful of that, and obviously just get used to maneuvering your character around, and making sure that if you're dodging 3 times and your stamina's low, don't go for that 4th dodge unless you really need to, because it's going to affect everything else. And blocking is one of those things, and that is probably going to be the most vital thing for you, especially when it comes to wars, is holding up that block and reducing that damage that is incoming. So bear that in mind. Number 3, and the final PvP must know, is timing heavy attacks rather than just spam clicking like ba 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 ba. We've all been there in PvP, sweating out, the drip is happening right now, and you just clicking your mouse. You want to be trying to unload as much damage as possible. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the best way to get out that damage, especially with this build. Considering we have all those heavy attack passives, the ones for grit, for the extra damage. Bear in mind, you're going to be hitting that light attack first to get the extra boost in damage. Then you're going to have to time that heavy attack perfect, rather than just losing your head and spamming away with the light attacks. So here are my useful tips alongside the PvP must-knows. These are basically just basic things about the game that I hope that you guys should understand going into full release. And it's just going to help you out a lot, considering I have struggled with them in the past, and I've kind of learned, and now I'm implementing this into my full build, which this is the build that I'll be going for on full release. Number 1, not all pure attributes work in this game. And what I mean by that is, like, if you want to go tank, the main thing that you would think is build constitution. All I want to do is build constitution, and that's like the only thing. As much as that is beneficial, in this game, it is more beneficial to tactically use those attributes in order to gain the checkpoint passives. So I am going to be covering the attributes for you guys now, so you can see obviously what points you want to be putting into which stat, and I'll explain briefly what I meant by not building the pure build all the time. So first, you are going to be wanting to put into constitution. This is going to increase your overall health, but this is the main thing to pay attention to. You want to be working towards this second checkpoint. It's 100 points on the constitution bar, and it is going to increase your max health by 10% of physical armor. Ignore the tools, but we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the max health here. This is so good, and it is a massive boost, to be honest. As soon as you hit this, it's going to be increasing your health, and it's just going to make you sustain even more damage. This is just going over at the start of the build. As soon as you get to the 200 point mark where you can spend that many points, you are going to be wanting to put into strength, because the strength is where your damage is going to be coming out. So for example, let me explain to you. So you are going to be going up against a tank with full constitution build. The fact you have the strength and the fact you are a bit of a hybrid is going to make you have a higher damage output, which is going to make you win those fights, especially if you outplay them. The reason I'm saying this is this one right here is the 100 mark required points, and it is going to give you that 10% damage to melee weapon heavy attacks. The heavy attacks there is the main thing, and it's going to be using those heavy attacks. That extra 10% damage is going to be the thing that is winning you those fights. They're not going to expect it, and whew, as soon as you block and you get that extra damage buff, boys, it's going to get messy. That's all I'm saying. The final thing I'll say about attributes before we move on is that you definitely want to be trying to build as much constitution in your weapons and armor. Strength and constitution is the build that you want to be going for. So just bear that in mind whenever you are going to be going for, the gear further down the line, in endgame, or whether it's covenant gear at the start. So guys, as I mentioned before, we're going to be moving on to the final part of the video. This is where it gets super, super interesting. And I think majority of you guys watching aren't actually going to know about this. And it is basically going to be the thing that changes the entire game. Like, as soon as we get max level and we start hitting that 60 mark, these are going to be the things that determine whether or not you're going to win or lose a fight, especially in the wars. Perks. This is a big topic of discussion at the moment in the New World community. And I tell you what, this is definitely going to be something that is at the top. You know, people are going to be prioritizing perks over gear score, attributes, over skills, everything. People will be using specific weapons purely for the perks. And I'll tell you why right now. So, as you can see, for the item type, I've selected sword because we're obviously going to be talking about the sword. And you can head on over to NWDB. It's the New World database. It's really, really great website. I'll drop the link in the description if you want to check over these perks and have a look yourself. But we've got the Great Axe there as well, which we'll be talking about some of these perks. And I'll explain myself now. We're going to start with the Great Axe. Insatiable Gravity Well. Gain 20% of your damage with Gravity Well back as health and cast another burst around you on successful hit. To me, that is mind-blowing. And you guys that have used the Great Axe before will completely understand, but you are going to be not only gaining health whilst you're in that Gravity Well and whilst you're doing damage on the explosion at the end, you're going to be able to cast another burst. So you're going to have a full new burst of damage as well as health and as well as fortify for your allies. So, whew, if you've got allies fighting with you and you're casting the Gravity Well with this perk, it says it in the description. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to really explain it again. So definitely a perk to look out for. If you do see drops on the Great Axe and you see Insatiable Gravity Well, you want to be going for that. The next one I'm going to be talking about is Mending Execute. And now, as you can see there, gain 5% of your health back on a kill with Execute. Now, as I mentioned before, we are going to be choosing Execute as one of the skills. That big damage when you are hitting targets under 50% health. And this is going to gain you that. This is going to gain you even more health than, I'll show you again, even more health than what Feed will be doing as well. So if you're hitting a target under 30% health, mate, you're going to be healing up not only 10% of the damage done, but if you've got Mend and Execute, you're going to gain an extra 5% health back on kill. Awesome stuff, mate. Especially in those 2v1s and 3v1s. Can you see how I'm trying to explain it now in terms of, you know, you're going to be outnumbering people by yourself. So we're going to jump straight over onto the sword now, and I'm going to explain basically my favorites. You know, the sword perks at the moment I don't feel are too overpowered, but we'll see how it goes into endgame. You know, I'll update you guys as we get on, but I think these are the selects for me, and I'm going to be explaining why. First, we have Refreshing Move. Now, light and heavy attacks reduce your active weapon cooldowns by 1%. Cooldowns on this game, I think, are the most important thing you can think about. You know, if you're getting skills that are going to be cooling down and refreshing the skill quicker than your enemy, then you are going to be realistically winning those fights, because it's your skills that are going to be doing the most damage, or you're reducing the most damage. It scales as the gear score gets higher and higher, so you know you can end up getting like 2.8% reduction on cooldown, which is absolutely incredible. The second one I'm going to mention today, you know, I wish I could cover all of these perks, but maybe that's time for another video. You know, I'll go over some of my favorite ones, but I'm just going over the sword and the Great Axe ones for now. The second one is Life Stealing. You gain 0% of the damage as health and does not trigger off persistent damage or does damage over time effects, which is perfect because we've not got hardly any damage over time effects, alongside the healing that we've already got from the Great Axe, and alongside Defiant Stance whilst getting Lifesteal. You know, it's going to be consistently healing you up, and people aren't going to be able to kill you. That is it from the perks. You know, I'm not going to cover these too much today, but definitely one to look out for. I'm telling you right now, perks are going to be game-changing for the game, especially at max level. So guys, like I said, I hope you've enjoyed the video. this is the first time I've ever done a build guide kind of thing, and I want you guys to give me some feedback. Obviously, I know it's not perfect, but I just kind of wanted to share my knowledge. And, you know, if you want to copy the build and you want to go for it, 100% go for it. I think it's a great build, and it definitely stood its ground in the beta. I tell you what, I was winning 90% of 1v1s, and I was taking on a lot of players even when I was outnumbered. On that note, before I do end the video, I just want to say this is primarily for when you are outnumbered and the 1v1s in PvP. You know, I mentioned a little bit about war. The only thing that you are going to be wanting to respec for the wars is the attributes into Constitution, you know, because your primary role is to stay alive. You aren't going to be really wanting to damage that much because you're going to have a team of DPS that they're going to be in that role better than you are, okay? So stick to what you know, stay in your lane, get that extra health, and stay alive, boys. That is my words of wisdom coming in from D there. That is it from me today, guys. I know it's a big video today, and I hope that I've done an alright job of it. I'm not the best with these sort of things, you know. But if you've enjoyed the content that's going out on the YouTube channel, please do let me know. Drop a comment below, and let me know what your build is going into full release. See you there, boys. 28th of September. Dilly D, signing out. Peace!